Mayor Olivia Chow is looking to target foreign homebuyers with a 10% tax. The Municipal Non-Resident Speculation Tax, or the MNRST, gotta come up with a shorter acronym for that, would force foreign buyers to pay an additional 10% on the purchase price of a residential property, starting in January 2025. The idea is that this would create availability of residential housing supply, and by keeping more inventory available to Canadians is supposed to help keep prices down. It's a little known fact that international buyers would buy property. This sort of tax would be in place to help Canadians purchase real estate, having more inventory available to them while keeping prices relatively low. In the mayor's own words, we have a housing crisis of supply, and because we have not built housing, affordable housing, and rent geared to income housing for people for several decades. And this isn't a new concept. This tax will be similar to the province's NRST, which is the non-resident speculation tax implemented back in 2017. This was put in place to charge foreign buyers a tax of 25% of the purchase price of certain properties throughout Ontario. Here's a bit of background. In April 2017, the non-resident speculation tax was introduced as a 15% tax on the purchase of residential property in the Greater Golden Horseshoe region by foreign corporations and individuals, which included anyone who was not a citizen or permanent resident of Canada. In March 2022, the NRST rate went up from 15 to 20%, and the coverage area was extended to include all of Ontario. By October 2022, the tax rate was increased again, this time to 25%, which is still in effect and doing a decent job at collecting tax revenues. But is it working to keep foreign buyers out of Canadian real estate? Keep watching. About $1.06 billion in tax revenue was collected across Ontario between 2017 to 2022. Of that $1.06 billion, $521 million was collected within Toronto alone through 4,153 land registrations, which makes up 49% of the total foreign buyer taxes collected. Break it down, and that's about $87 million through roughly 700 transactions each year in Toronto. 700 transactions isn't a lot when you consider the overall picture, because in 2023, about 26,000 properties exchanged hands through MLS, which works out to be only 3% of all transactions in Toronto last year that were through foreign buyers, who were also exempted from the foreign buyer ban, which we'll get into more later in this video. As for other parts of the GTA, York region collected $259 million, which worked out to be 24% of the total tax collected until 2023. Both Peel and Halton regions collected about $74 million, which is about 7%. Durham region only collected $15 million in taxes, representing just 1% of the total foreign buyer taxes collected since 2017. When you consider the growth Durham region has seen in recent years, that just surprises me. Maybe foreign investors don't see the value in Durham, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And now, welcome to my channel. My name is Fred Tam. I'm a real estate broker in Toronto and putting out new videos on YouTube every single week to update you guys on what's happening with the real estate market and the best tips to help you reach your real estate goals. Hit subscribe if you're gaining value, and keep watching as we get into this new tax on foreign buyers and the foreign buyer ban, which was introduced in 2023. The federal government announced the foreign buyer ban, which was officially called the Prohibition on the Purchase of Residential Property by Non-Canadians Act. But to keep it simple, foreign buyer ban. The ban was introduced in 2023 to block foreign buyers from buying in Canada, starting January 1st, 2023 and ending this year originally, but now extending until 2027. Sounds good, but it was filled with a few exceptions that sort of made this ban not as effective as it could have been. So first off, it obviously didn't apply to Canadian citizens. It also didn't apply to permanent residents of Canada. The ban also had an exception for any property that was 4 or more units. This meant that if you wanted to buy a multi-residential property like a fourplex and you're not a Canadian or permanent resident, that was okay, and you could still do that. Last year, 42 multiplexes were sold in Toronto with an average price of $2.8 million. They're fantastic investment opportunities since they have the potential to passively grow in appreciation over time, which is the long-term play, and they can also provide an income every single month covering your expenses. Next, international students were also exempted from the foreign buyer ban if they spent most of the previous 5 years in the country. They were permitted to buy property up to $500,000, which meant that anywhere outside of BC and Ontario was more or less not part of the ban by definition of this exemption, because the average home prices anywhere outside of BC and Ontario was less than $500,000. BC and Ontario represent about half of Canada's total population of 39 million. About 20 million people in the rest of the country still might have felt the pressure from foreign buyers. Next, for anyone that worked and filed a tax return in Canada for 3 out of 4 years before buying property was also exempt from the foreign buyer ban. It's almost like an extension of the international student exemption, because if you're a student, I'm hopeful that there's a good bunch of students working part-time full-time jobs, and paying taxes. International students actually account for a large part of our population. In 2021, there were 444,000 study permits issued, and in 2022, Canada issued 551,000 study permits, which is an all-time high number, increasing 25% from the year before. And by the end of 2022, there were just under 808,000 international students holding valid Canadian study permits, most of which are attending educational institutions here in Ontario. Just based on the rate of how quickly study permits were being processed that year, it's forecasted that the number of study permits issued in 2023 will hit a new record of 600,000. That's a lot of people who can still buy within Canada. That's 600,000 who, by exemption of this prohibition, are still allowed to purchase property in Canada. And there were a few other exemptions like work permit holders, refugees, diplomats, non-Canadians with a spouse or common law partner who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, or registered under the Indian Act, and even properties like cabins and vacation homes were also exempted. That's a long list. It's almost like you have to wonder who wasn't exempted. It's definitely possible that some foreign buyers would attempt to make a purchase while disregarding the ban and actually be successful. But those who violated the ban and were caught could see a fine of $10,000. They might even be forced to sell the property that they purchased. But now let's just say that as of today, the foreign buyer ban is working. This was intended to impact residential ownership to keep inventory available for Canadians for a 2-year period between 2023 to 2025, which has now been extended to 2027, which means that by the end of 2027, no more ban on foreign buyers. There's speculation that buyers outside of Canada would buy real estate, but also pump up market prices, making it more difficult for local buyers. Yet, Stats Canada homeownership data showed only 2.6% of Toronto's housing stock was owned by non-residents in 2021. And realistically, if the average cost of a house was 67% more than what the average Canadian household could afford, and the median household would need to spend 60% of its income on ownership costs, then the problem isn't foreign ownership. It's affordability, and this foreign buyer ban didn't do much to bring that down. So after 1 year, has the ban on foreign buyers been working? The average number of foreign buyer transactions we normally see in Toronto is about 700 per year. It'll be difficult to say how effective the ban was last year. The real estate market was slow in 2023 due to the impact of higher interest rates, so it's possible that foreign buyers hit the brakes. Even though Canadians stepped back from the real estate market, there were still 26,000 transactions in Toronto. By comparison, in 2022, before the ban, there were 32,000 transactions, and in 2021, 45,000 transactions in Toronto recorded on MLS. The drop in transaction volume last year helped bring down prices, but I would argue to say that it's a direct result from the foreign buyer ban. This alone isn't enough to make housing more affordable in Toronto, so Mayor Olivia Chow announced a 10% tax on foreign buyers of Toronto property. This new tax would begin in 2025 to help bring down prices further by discouraging foreign buyers. It sounds good to tax them more, but if only 700 transactions per year on average are contributing to the overall picture, then how much will this actually benefit local Toronto home buyers and the overall Toronto real estate market? City Council will consider the speculation tax at its next meeting, scheduled to take place from February 6th to the 8th. If passed, the tax would take an effect on January 1st, 2025. If the goal is truly to keep housing affordable and available for Canadians first and foremost, then would it not make more sense to ban foreign buyers completely without having a list of several exemptions rather than still allowing them to purchase at a higher tax rate? Drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.